disabilities often occur alongside other disabilities. So someone who has mobility issues cannot be purely denied the daspass because it's the why it's happening. Will this affect them to be in a wheelchair? Are there other things going on? And I've done a few videos on this channel about the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and Walt Disney World and their daspass, which is their disability service system for guests with disabilities, which allows for them to not skip the line, but to wait outside the line instead of being online for an attraction. And I've spoken about a number of issues that are about this daspass and the way they operate, as well as, for that matter, Universal's AAP, their Attraction Assistance Pass, which is their equivalent. The issue I wanted to speak about in today's video is actually a response to some of your comments that you've been leaving on my previous videos. And I wanted to address this because a lot of you had questions or comments on this matter, which is the Disney daspass and people getting denied for the daspass based on mobility. Disney loves to use this loophole regarding their daspass, stating that if your issue is purely mobility, that does not qualify you for the daspass. And then they will say, if it's purely an issue of mobility, go get yourself a wheelchair or scooter, and then you don't have a technical issue of waiting on line, the duration of the line. This is a little bit of a gray area, and that is why it is important for people to educate themselves on things such as the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. There are a number of people who are most likely Disney employees that will comment on my videos, and they will talk about how the ADA does not cover attractions or theme parks, and yes, it does. It's about all businesses and business being accommodating to individuals protected by the ADA. There's actually an entire thumbs up that you can read about how it covers theme parks, it covers businesses. But let's get back to what we're talking about in this video. So people have been discussing that if their issue is only mobility, you stubbed your toe and you cannot wait on the line, you need to be in a wheelchair, that Disney has been denying them the daspass based on this. What Disney needs to realize about this, as well as people being educated, is that mobility issues are not clear-cut. There is gray area there. So, for example, I'll give you a few examples. Someone that I know is a partial paraplegic. In this case, the person cannot walk with their legs. They have leg braces and they use their upper body strength to move themselves. In the case of this person, part of their regimen is that they walk. It would be unhealthy to them physically as well as mentally. It would actually harm their condition for them to be in a wheelchair. On top of that, there are other issues going on with this individual, and it is not just a mobility issue. So there is a gray area where it is, number one, the mobility issue can be occurring with other issues, and then it's the why behind the mobility issue. Some people have spoken about like arthritis and different conditions, and will this count, will that count? And it's like, I'm not a doctor, and I don't know all the technicalities of people's conditions, and quite frankly, it's not Disney's place to try to do that either. And the answer is it's complicated. There could be, perhaps this person's condition is made worse by being in a wheelchair. Perhaps it's that they need to be able to go through a line quickly, and then they need to go and sit down, and then they need to stand up again. And it's not Disney's place to say that, to put people's disabilities and to categorize them and say this sounds like on the same level of you stubbed your toe, because that's not what's happening. So again, disabilities often occur alongside other disabilities. So someone who has mobility issues cannot be purely denied the daspass because it's the why it's happening. Will this affect them to be in a wheelchair? Are there other things going on? And that's not Disney's place. And no offense, with some of the people that work there are probably not, I'm guessing that they're not doctors who can't get a job as a medical doctor and they chose to be a Disney cast member instead. And they're not in a business to be making that judgment on people. Other people will come back and be like, well, how will they decipher between those who need it and those who don't? The double-sided edge of this is that, yes, there will always be people who abuse the system, but at the same time, they cannot discriminate against people because the ADA protects against that. I guess you hope to an extent that people's own moral compass helps to slow that down. And yes, there will always be people where that is not the case. Obviously, the same discussion applies to Universal. Yes, in certain cases, it is possible that they may be able to say that someone's structure or their condition creates an unsafe hazard for certain rides. That is possible. And in those cases, I don't believe that they're discriminating against you. They have said, and you could use your own imagination, that depending on certain situations, it is possible that a person's structure or their disability or this or that could make an unsafe situation for them on certain types of roller coasters and attractions. That kind of is common sense. I've spoken about in the past regarding the people mover that there was actually an article, it's not an article, it's actually in when you start to research the ADA, that when they did that refurb on the people mover, the Magic Kingdom, and the ride was shut down, it was shut down for a very long amount of time, they had an obligation, Disney, to install, to bring that ride up to code and be it ADA accessible. But because of their involvement with Reedy Creek, they didn't feel that they had to answer to anyone. So during that time period, people would say, oh, they were grandfathered in. Actually, I found information saying that they shut down the ride. They were actually, it's not supposed to be that way. They're supposed to actually bring it up to code. And they're not, in other words, immune from that. And they could have built a freestanding elevator. I have a whole video on this. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the conversation of service dogs. Service dogs are another protected element, and this is associated with the ADA. Of course, you will hear stories time and time again of someone who was denied access to a location because of their service dog, and you will see those stories often on the news, and they end up suing and they end up getting an apology from the manager. But those are experiences that really embarrass the person, cause a lot of trauma, and I think that the people involved in those situations, number one, always dread that could eventually happen, and honestly wish that a situation like that would not happen. And unfortunately, at Universal and not so much Disney, I have heard stories of people's service animals being harshly questioned, and then I've read stories on like TripAdvisor and Reddit. Whether they're true or not, I don't know, but that's where people go to talk about experiences with these theme parks, where unfortunately the service animal was denied in certain situations. There was a TripAdvisor or Reddit comment that was about, I think, Cabana Bay, and they spoke about how somehow the service animal was in the room and they were not in the room. That's another thing. You don't always have to be with your service animal. That's part of the ADA. You are allowed to leave your service animal, in the room and go out. You are not tied to the animal. If the person with the disability feels that in that moment they can function without the animal, then you have no need to prove it is with you 24/7. And something in this person's comment, they wrote that they were locked out of the room and they were denied access to their service animal. Other comments of people who had trouble upon check-in at Universal resorts with a service animal, even though they had told the hotel they were coming ahead of time. A service animal is medical equipment to a person with disabilities. It is not a friend. Sometimes they're referred to as friends, in order to be like, not, embarrass the person with disabilities. But a service animal serves as medical equipment to a person with disabilities. With theme parks, to show any proof, a lot of times one of the things you'll always hear people complaining about is the person at the resort or the restaurant will want proof of it. And unfortunately, that actually doesn't exist. There's no national registry of service animals. And people who have those little cards where they like show some weird paperwork, that is often, unfortunately, the ones that may not be a service animal, because that doesn't exist. Like, you can go to like a professional place and have them help train the animal, but there's actually no like documented proof of an animal being a service animal. And also, depending on the state you live in, like Florida actually has extra protection when it comes, I believe, I don't know if all states, but I'm pretty, I once looked this up for myself, that animals in training are also protected in Florida. So you can have a puppy that you're training at Universal or Disney and getting it acclimated to the environment, and it still counts. It's still protected. And unfortunately, that is something a person with disability should not be worrying about being accosted or harassed with their service animal. They can ask them 2 questions. Is this a service animal? And what task is it provided to provide for you? They cannot ask you for proof. They cannot ask you your name of your disability. An example could be, yes, it is a service animal and it is trained to bring me out of an attack. It is trained to provide, compression or something like that. But you do not need to actually tell them, I have such and such disability and blah, blah, blah. The consequences for them not abiding this are to, make a report against them to the ADA, and then they could be fined. But yeah, I've been getting a lot of information or comments on my videos asking me, questions about, mobility. So, there are going to always be people that you look at them and you don't think it's a service dog. And in those situations, you cannot do anything about it. I think residences or buildings you live in may be able to ask you for some sort of document, not a proof that it's a service, but like a note from like a doctor or something saying you need it or something like that. But again, it wouldn't be the name of the disability. But that is the only exception I think I know of. But theme parks are not part of that, and neither are hotels. There's always going to be people who don't need the daspass, and there's always going to be people who don't need a service dog. There is a particular theme park blogger, and again, people are going to be like, oh, this is hypocritical because you just got done saying that you can't ask or make judgment. There is a particular theme park blogger who has a moderate following, and this person recently acquired a dog, and they have been taking them and starting to take them to the parks and the Disney Resort. And personally, we're rational people, so unfortunately we can sometimes make the distinction between something that really looks like a service animal that's providing a task to its owner, and we look at those people and we know not to go near the dog. We know it's a working animal, and a dog that just doesn't appear to be that way. And unfortunately, this theme park blogger, in my opinion, is one of these people who is giving a bad, vibe to people who need service animals. And that's why a lot of times, unfortunately, people get harassed. Is it a service animal? Again, yes, that's the hypocritical nature of this comment. We cannot ask them. We cannot ask them to provide proof. You could ask this person, is it a service animal? And what tasks is it provided to do for you? The irony of that with this individual is I have watched this person's content before, and this person seems to have like a little bit of a temper. So what's interesting is I don't think this person has yet encountered those questions, and they are allowed to ask those 2 questions. And what's funny is I think that if they were asked those 2 questions by a cast member, is it a service dog, and 2, what task is it provided, This person, unfortunately, is so comes off so high and mighty that I think that they would react very badly to those questions and would probably make a scene if they were asked those questions. And yes, they're allowed to ask those 2 questions. Yeah, I just wanted to share this information on my personal knowledge on some of the questions you guys have been asking regarding the Disney DasPass, the ADA mobility issues, and then I added in that extra part of service animals because you guys may ask me about that. And again, just to reiterate that one question someone has asked me a few times, does this apply if I'm visiting, for example, from the UK and I'm visiting Disney World? Yes, because it doesn't have to do with you, it has to do with the business. The business is operating in the United States and then you are there. You get the point. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. And remember to like, subscribe, all that. And I will see you soon in my next video. And